Hosted by Dr. Alex G. on behalf of Serve Wisconsin AmeriCorps, Transform Your Leadership invites you as an AmeriCorps member to engage your own journey and transformation as you become leaders who enrich lives and communities. Now here's Dr. G.
Dr. Alex G. is a social entrepreneur and the president and founder of the Nehemiah Center for Urban Leadership and Development, a 27-year-old nonprofit organization that inspires, develops, and mobilizes emerging African American leaders to become partners in revitalizing and transforming the community of Madison, Wisconsin. He received his doctorate in transformational leadership and is the author, podcast host, father, community leader, and an activist. Please welcome the Reverend Dr. Alex G.
I'll hold it. Gene, thank you so much. Just want to say, first of all, again, a special thank you to the AmeriCorps Serve staff for your great leadership, for bringing this great event together. Can we just give that team a hand again, Gene and your team? I want to really welcome you all here. So to all of you who are serving in AmeriCorps, it's great to see you. How are you feeling this morning? All right. Hey, black people, what's up? Hey. I've always wanted to do that in a speech. I've never ever done that before. Woo, okay, all right. Hey, everybody else. Hey, how you all doing? This is, like, gosh, they're opening up with a black racist. No, I just... I'm from Wisconsin. I'm not used to seeing this many black people at one time. And so I'm like, wow, let me just look at y'all. Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. No. Okay, let me. I really am so excited about being here. So often I'm asked to be the person to talk about race. I'm usually called in when there's strife and issues. And so I'm really touched that the AmeriCorps team has asked me to come in to talk about leadership because it's really my passion. It's what I enjoy talking about. And actually, I think it's the lack of leadership and cross-cultural leadership that makes racial harmony a thing that seems so distant from us. And so I'm really happy that I'm asked to think what is typically outside the box for me, but something that's very near and dear to my heart. In the last few years, I've been a pastor for about 32 years. I'm an author, but most recently I've become a podcast host, and I really like that. One, I can say words that I can't say in the pulpit. I can talk about things that I can't talk about. Oh, hell yeah, I can say stuff that I can't say at church, and have interesting conversations about things that impede us in just working more clearly, more closely together. You'll hear more about that and why that's important and how that work intersects with you. But just know that it's really my pleasure to be here and to be able to talk with us about leadership and how leadership really helps us to change communities around us. Another thing I want to say before I get into my talk is I really want to laud you all for the choice that you have made. I'm a dad of a soon-to-be 23-year-old. My daughter's in her first year of grad school. And I'm noticing something very different about your generation that was not necessarily the case about mine. I'm in my mid-50s. I started college in '81, and everyone wanted to go into business school. We didn't call it IT, we called it comp sci. It was computer science. Back in those days, everyone was studying COBOL and Fortran. That sounds like a foreign language. You all don't even know what I'm talking about. But everyone wanted to really go and make money, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there was not a lot of talk about how do we give back to our community. What I'm completely floored by is the generosity of your time, of your heart, of your experiences, that you want to bring it into communities that could benefit from it. And I think that is to be lauded, is to be recognized, that you're taking this time to do something in communities where your help is certainly welcomed, certainly needed in many ways. And so for you to take the time to want to care about the community and want to give back and to help America really strengthen some of its weak areas and to show the strengths and the abilities that we have to release untapped potential, I think is really wonderful. And so I just want to laud you for the choices that you all have made. I really do. I'm very proud of you. I'm not trying to sound too paternal or too parental, but it just does my heart good because as we talk about your generation, people are always talking about things that don't go well or what you're reading or what you're looking at or what you're wearing or all of these other things, but they don't pause enough to understand the capacity to love, the capacity to want to help other people, the propensity to care is amazing. And as I walked in this room, it was palpable. I could feel it, I could sense it, and so I just want you to know that that means a lot to me, and I'm really, really proud to be here. Fridays are my off days. I don't even wake up until like 3 in the afternoon, and so I've got to really love AmeriCorps to roll out the bed at 5 in the morning to get here in time. Plus, I want to see the giraffes. I want to see the giraffes too. I got to see the giraffes. So let me just talk to you all a little bit. I want to encourage you, and I want to tell stories that have nuggets of leadership in them. Because I don't want this to feel like a typical speech, but I really just want this to be a time of coaching you as you begin to think about your leadership. And I'm saying it through the lens of what would have been helpful to me when I started out in my leadership years ago, and things that I've been sharing with younger staff in the last few years. Let me first just tell you a little bit about myself, and I think it'll set us up for the talk today. My family moved to Madison from Chicago when I was 6 years old, and my mom went on vacation to Madison to visit one of her childhood friends, and loved it. Any of you live in Madison currently? Love the lakes, love the campus. Yeah, hey, Madisonians. Yeah, I'm from Fitchburg. I'm from the south side of the burg, and so she came and she loved Madison. She loved the campus. She loved that in those days it was a real radical place. Students were going to classes barefoot, all this kind of stuff. My mother came back to Chicago. She packed us up and she moved us to Madison. And she said she loved the look of the campus and she wanted to go to school. Now, what you have to consider, so let me just fast forward and I'm going to back up a little bit. My mom has dementia today, but she's still doing fine. I feel sorry for me, not for her, because she doesn't know. And she still bosses me around. She still knows that she's the boss. But here's the thing. My mother has a master's degree in social work that she got from Wisconsin. My mother helped me start my nonprofit. For years, she was a staff member who did in-home family therapy. My sister also helped us start it because she was one of 3 African-American social workers for Dane County and was a social worker for decades. And so together, my family created what's now known as the Nehemiah Center for Urban Leadership and Development. But let me go back and tell you how the story began. When my mother came to Madison, she was a high school dropout. She dropped out partway through her freshman year of high school because it was not cool for black girls to be smart in that part of the world in the 50s. So my mother chose to dumb down and to pretend like she was not smart. So she dropped out of school. She got a job as what was called back in those days as a key punch operator. We probably call it data entry now, data management, and did that and was able to take care of her family. She met my father, married him, but found herself in a a domestic violent relationship. Her husband, my father, was not physically abusive to me as a child, but he was extremely abusive to my mother. And one day when my mother looked down and I was sick and I was about 1.5 years or 2, I jumped on my father's leg to try to help my mother fight against him. My mother thought, you know what, rather than having your son hate you the way you hate your father because of what your father did to your mother, we're out of here because we're not going to repeat this cycle. And so she wanted to get away from that relationship. She was going through a divorce and she moved to Madison. So she had maybe a part of a credit of her freshman year. She came to Wisconsin and she took the entrance exam and she just crushed it. The only thing was they couldn't admit her because she did not have a high school equivalency. So after qualifying for admission to Wisconsin, she had to go take the GED in order to qualify for college. Yeah, you gotta love systems. But here's the thing. My mom retired as a family therapist. My sister served as a social worker. I'm now the longest serving minister in our community. There are very few nonprofits that are community-based, building capacity in the African American community, breaking down walls of systemic racism, working with men and women coming out of prison. We own 5 homes where we place folks coming out of prison. We place over 300 people in jobs coming out of prison. But here's what I want you to know. When my mother sat down with the social workers, because she was a single mom and we called it free and reduced lunch. We were on welfare. We called it AFDC back in those days. When folks met with my mother, they never talked to her like she was a West Side refugee from Chicago. They never, and I use those words because that's how sometimes our community respond to people coming to Madison from larger cities. We got a name for people from Milwaukee too, but I'll tell you that after I finish talking. They never pigeonholed my mother or put her in a box. They said, what do you want to do? She said, I want to go to college. Well, what do you need to go to college? Well, I need some help with housing. Boom, they helped her with housing. And not in some place where she was ghettoized, but in a place that was close to campus and where kids could go outside and play. What else do you need? Well, I need some support for childcare while I go to school. The things she needed, the campus came around her, the city came around her. And rather than looking at her weaknesses and just saying, well, you didn't go to high school, you dropped out your freshman year, you have no real work experience except data entry. What do you mean you want to go to college? What do you mean you want to go to law school? What do you mean you want to help your children go to college? So we fast forward and we tell the story. But my mother always had that strength, and she was always instilling that strength in us. But I appreciate those who are in service to my mother who did not look down on her or try to tell her what she could accomplish because of what she had already accomplished. How many of you here are recipients of folks who have put you in boxes? I mean, you've experienced people who tried to put you in a box or say, well, because of your background or because of your zip code or because of this, because of that. Fortunately, I don't know who trained those folks who sat with, but I'm sorry that happened. My guidance counselor told me that I was not college material. But because I watched my mother go to college after not going to high school, and my counselor sat in that office and told me I could not go, I went and found my own college admissions program, got myself into the University of Wisconsin because people didn't limit my mother. My mother didn't limit herself. I watched her go to college, and then her next generation, my sister and I were told we were not college material, went to the same university that my mother did. My family has 13 degrees from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. 13. And my counselor, who told me that I was not smart enough to go to college, must address me as Dr. G. Period. Period. So my wish for you all, beautiful folks, gifted folks, young people, is that you would be like the staff who didn't limit my mom. Because they didn't limit her, my counselor couldn't limit me. And now my daughter's on a free ride of graduate school because they couldn't limit her. You have the potential of unleashing the potential of generations of people if we just do this right. That's the opportunity we have. That's the moment we're facing, and I think that that's why you're in this work. One day I was grocery shopping, and I was noticing a dad with a son with this little small grocery cart. So, they have these carts, they're called future shoppers. These are for future, you've seen them. So he's walking down the aisle, and I love seeing dads with their, with their children. A lot of my focus is fatherhood and its impact on children. And so I was watching this situation going on, and so it was like, all right, buddy, do we have the cornflakes? Check, Dad. He was like 4 years old. All right, do we have the peanut butter? Check, Dad. He's like, and you can tell his dad is really proud. His little shopper. He's like, pushing his cart. He said, we have the eggs. Yeah, Dad. And then he said, we got the bread. He goes, yeah. And then they're going towards the checkout, and the son says, Dad, we don't have toast. This really happened. I can't make this stuff up. He said, Dad, do we have toast? And he said, hey, no, buddy, but we got bread. He said, but Dad, we don't have toast. So now people are stopping who've been watching this dad and this cute little boy shop. We're now watching. This cute little boy is about to have a meltdown. He's like, Dad, we don't have toast. At this point, he's trying to address his son, but he's also trying to address everybody else in aisle 6. And folks know it's going down, so over the loudspeaker you hear, clean up on aisle 6, clean up on aisle 6. It's about to go down on aisle 6. Timmy is finna snap. What the young boy didn't understand was the process. And what the father didn't understand is that his son didn't understand the process. And the lack of the knowledge of the process by which bread becomes toast, and the lack of understanding how a 4-year-old processes collided on aisle 6. And I was late to work that day because I wanted to find out, was Timmy going to win or Timothy? Leadership is a process. It's not about turning bread into toast overnight. And the people who attempt to do so have a meltdown in aisle 6. But folks who understand and respect the process can help people move to a better understanding and better service. And I want to talk about how love and understanding and transformation are held together and hopefully apply that to our work and things that we do. A prolific writer, Jawanza Kunjufu, he was more popular in the 80s, a gentleman out of Chicago who wrote a lot about the education of black boys. He wrote about the conspiracy against black boys. He said that you cannot teach a child that you don't love. Dr. Kunjufu said you cannot teach a child you don't love. So what does love mean? Because in this kind of work, we're not really supposed to talk about love. We're talking about efficiency, evidence-based practices, outcomes, procedures, and all of that is true. All of that is appropriate. I know your leaders are thinking, oh my gosh, what's he about to say? He's about to turn my whole crew into touchy-feely folks, and young people who aren't going to obey any of our rules are just going to go and just care about folks. But what I'm really talking about is, how do you put someone's needs before your own? How do you respect people? And how do you create space where you want the best for them? That's what I mean by love. A space where you want the best for them. I had a third grade teacher. His name was Mr. Lilliquist. He was a recovering hippie. He had long hair. He had a ponytail. This was before man buns were man buns. This was 1972. He failed his teacher, what's it called when you study education? You got a field placement or intern, that thing. He failed it. Thank you, Phil. He failed it. But the kids loved him, and he was given a job. Back in those days, they ranked your reading classes and your math classes based on your ability. So it was sort of a tough thing. Like, you knew if you weren't really good in reading or math. They got rid of that because I think it traumatized kids. I still remember my reading level. But I worked to get into Mr. Lilliquist's math class. I had to work out of my math class, and I had to be able to do 300 multiplication facts, 100 in 3 minutes. But I mastered it so that I could get into his class. And, and I still remember this. Again, this was 1972. He read us James and the Giant Peach. He introduced me to Willy Wonka. He taught us how to make root beer. And so I invited him to my 8th birthday party. My mother tried to tell me teachers are busy people. AmeriCorps volunteers are busy people. And that that teachers couldn't come, they couldn't do this. And while she's explaining it, the bell rings and he comes in. And I look at my mother and I said, "See, Mom, I told you he'd come." She was mad because that meant he knew that she was talking about me and him. Not only did Mr. Lilliquist come to my 8th birthday party, he came to my 40th. He came to my 50th. He was invited to my 55th, but we had a death in the family, so I had to cancel the party. I'm about to throw a 56th. He'll be there. And I bumped into him one day at the grocery store. I met his dad. He's met my daughter. He knows my family. He encouraged my mom to go to college. When Mom would take me to school, he would stand in the hall while we sat inside reading James and the Giant Peach. "Furling, how's school going? What are you studying?" And I remember thinking, Mr. Lilliquist is the coolest teacher in the school, and he thinks it's cool that my mom is going to school, so my mom must be cool, because I don't understand why grown-up is going to school, and I'm embarrassed that my mom's in school, but because my teacher thinks it's cool, I rethought my mom. And I bumped into him and I said, "Mr. Lilliquist, we're struggling with racial achievement, academic achievement, the racial divide. What's going on?" And he said to me, "Alex," he said, "racism is the problem. Love is the solution. Is that easy? Is that complicated?" When he said this to me, my eyes got watery. Because I realized as a 3rd grader, what I loved about his class is that I felt a sense of love and respect. Not more than anybody, not less than anybody. Mr. Lilliquist loved everybody and gave you room to grow. It was in this class I realized I could do math. It was in this class I realized I really am smart. It was in this class that I thought that I could be creative. He created space where I could find myself. That's what I mean by love. I don't mean dumbing down. I don't mean lowering the expectations, raising the bar. but communicating in a way that was affirming, communicating in a way that was empowering, being my teacher on Friday, and being at my house on Saturday for my birthday. Not everyone could do that. Not all teachers did that. And not every third grader invited him. But there was something that made me want to be around that because it helped me to become who I was and not who he wanted me to be. Love is so important. As we begin to love people, we can serve them and we can help them. But if we have folks who are not, who we're serving, and you're in so many areas. You're doing various things. You're working with a plethora of populations. But if you don't really understand what it means to create space where they can really find themselves, then we really harm people and we damage folks. That's what I mean by love, because unless the work that we're doing is really rooted in that, we limit people. Traditional social services says you got a plan, you got an agenda, get this down to the folks. You've got this information, you got to get it down to people. And we don't get a chance to step back and really look at them and find out what do they need to really become themselves. The second part of that Dr. Kunjufu quote says, it says that you can't love kids that you don't understand. And so he first says that you can't love children you can't teach children who you don't love, serve people you don't love, but you can't love people who you don't understand. Although the father loved this child, you could tell he loved him some Timmy. It came to question when Timmy was having that meltdown in the aisle, but what he didn't do is he didn't understand that Timmy didn't understand the process. That just because he ate toast didn't mean he didn't understand. He probably was brushing his teeth or watching SpongeBob, but he was not watching the process, did not get the process, and didn't understand the process by which bread became toast. And so how do you understand? How do you understand what folks are going through? How do you understand the process? He loved his son, but didn't understand the process. You got to do some work to understand what the folks you're serving are really going through. And they can teach you. They can tell you what's going on in the community. They can give you an understanding of what this is like. They can help you to understand what's going on. Because in understanding them, what you'll realize is that you can see more than their weaknesses. You can look beyond their diagnoses. Because people aren't just their labels, but they are people who have experienced things. And so in understanding folks, we've got to be able to really lean into them. We've got to be really willing to really listen to them. We've got to be willing to understand what the real issues are. Years ago, I used to work for the University of Wisconsin as a recruiter. And I got a call from a frantic parishioner. And she said that her husband was really, that he had got caught up in a crack house. This is a brilliant person, brilliant thinker, just really on the wrong side of things. This is like the early 90s. I'm going to talk over some of your head. You're not going to know what I'm talking about. But New Jack City was still fresh out. I was scared to go in this house. I didn't know if Mookie was going to be up in there. Google it. You'll understand what I'm talking about. All right, let me see if y'all really know. Who played Mookie? Chris Rock played Mookie. I got some people my age. All right. So anyway, I'm sorry. I digress. And so I went there, and he was strung out, and called another buddy. We went and got him and took him home to his wife. It was frightening because this was not part of my work. I'd never been inside a crack house or house where crack was sold. I'd never seen anyone really binged out like that. And the environment of people who wanted him to stay in that environment because how it benefited them was really frightening. When he sobered up a little bit, I said to him, buddy, we got to address this crack cocaine issue. He said, Doc, crack ain't my problem. And I thought, oh, crap, here we go. He said, crack is my solution. You haven't asked me about my problem. What he basically said is, you're training as a leader. You're training as a theologian. You're training as a social service provider. Your training as a social entrepreneur is to look at people's isms and their titles and what have happened to them. And you came all the way off your job and carried me out of this basement and took me back home because you think cocaine is my problem? Cocaine is how I deal with my problem. You haven't taken the time to ask me about my problem. You have not asked me about my childhood. You have not addressed the issues of my of my abuse, of my abandonment, of my beatings, of my rape. You've not even talked about that. All you want to do is sit there and cross your legs and hold a clipboard and talk to me about addiction? Man, please. Traditional training teaches us to diagnose before we listen to people, to look at them through our lenses. This is what I think is going on. If you just had a dad in the home, if you just read to your children, if you just did this, if you just did that, and we don't take time. Isn't it interesting we have plenty of time to diagnose and we don't have enough time to listen? But when you and I have gone to physicians, good physicians, don't they listen, or healthcare providers, don't they listen in order to properly diagnose what's going on? In fact, if you walk in and people just start rattling off solutions and have not even diagnosed you, get up and walk out of that office. Because anyone who's not listened to you or looked at you cannot help you. The pressures of work, the pressures of what you got to get through the day, the pressures of the caseload will make us want to move quickly to diagnoses. But we've got to listen. What's the real problem? What's really going on? How do we invest in folks? They're more than their labels. This is not a crack mother. This is a mom who may have a crack problem. This is not a single mom. This is a mother who may not have anybody helping her to raise the children. This is not an ex-con. This is somebody's mother and dad and brother and sister and auntie who went to jail. They're formerly incarcerated. But stop slapping all these labels on people, because when you begin to put labels on them, you don't have to respect them. You don't have to, and that's what happens. When I was a bank teller years ago in another life, I did a lot of things. When I was a bank teller, they trained me. Do not leave the teller line with the bank robber. Because if they get you out the bank, they will kill you. Statistics, they said fainting, pass out, do not, under any circumstances. They said while they are robbing you, while you're reaching into the drawer, hey, I'm a student. Hey, I got a little kid at home. They said talk to them, because they've made up in their minds that you're already an ATM. Because if you're an ATM, they can put a bullet in your forehead. But if you're talking, if you're a person, if you're relational, it's hard. They've got to work hard to shoot you. Now, this is tough training. I was a 19-year-old receiving this training. Why? Because when you become objectified, people can annihilate you. So when the people you are serving are a single mother, a crack addict, an ex-con, you don't have to respect them. No one has to give them the time of day. No one has to offer them a glass of water. Come in, pee in this cup, do what I say, stand here, go there, then go your way because I got somebody else to serve. That's not why you chose this work, and that does not make us better and stronger. What we need in society today are people who will look beyond the labels and the diagnoses, who will have enough love and then understanding of people to ask them, what can I do to empower you? What can I do to support you? That's the work that you're really called to do. Because anybody can slap labels on people and then objectify them and then look the other way. That's why we're in the mess that we're in today. Because people refuse to see the humanity of other people. And we want you to see the mentality and the humanity of these folks. So if you don't know the issues, how are you going to help folks? Learn the issues. Don't try to diagnose stuff that you don't understand. Don't try to give easy answers to difficult situations. Say, I don't know. Tell me more about it. What's going on? There's this theory that's used for social workers, people in social service arenas, that it says that the body language of people providing services indicates to people that they're serving, ooh, I don't get you and you jacked up. That if someone says something that they do and it's different than our worldview, they say we sort of sit back and say, and your posture shows, I hope this hour finishes. I hope this hour goes quickly. They say, but in order to fight that, when you don't understand the situation, take your chair and move it closer. Lean in and say, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. How did that happen? How did that feel? That just in leaning in, it makes a person feel less other. That you're engaged and listening, and they might open up and divulge, because guess what? People are smart enough to know what's wrong with them. I hope you don't think that people are sitting in communities waiting for you to come and tell them what's wrong. I hope that you understand that part of your work is helping to awaken people to the reality of the resource they are and the resources they have in order to become a very powerful force in their communities. So learn to lean in, not just physically, but emotionally. Lean in and not pull back. We've got to lean into folks, because most of the people who are serving don't understand those that they're not serving. And that's why in places like Wisconsin, there's this huge gap in services because people don't lean in. And if it is your issue, it's still not your issue. So, well, I'm going to talk to people who might have this issue. I'm going to talk to people who drink or do drugs because I understand escapism. Well, they might be self-medicating, like this friend I was talking about. So just because you had an issue didn't mean you had that issue for the same reason they had the issue. So because you've been through something, don't come in and say, yeah, I know, shh, let me tell you what's wrong with you. I know because I've been there too. I lived in those neighborhoods too. I ate government cheese too. No, just, people don't need that. Just shh and listen. And let them begin to talk to you about why and where they're stuck. Because once you understand people and you understand what makes them tick because they tell you, you can then work to empower people, to think about their community differently, their place within the community different, and that's where true transformation comes. You know, in the Toast story, the dad had a love for his son. The son obviously had a love for toast. Didn't get bread, didn't understand bread. I don't know when and where the dad fully got the son to understand. At some point, I'm sure that he did, because what it looks like in the future is that at some point, Timmy begins to understand the process of how toast is made, and then Timmy can make his own toast. He doesn't have to have this meltdown with his dad in aisle 6. He understands the process. Hey, Dad, we got bread, we got butter, we got toast. Provided he understands that you need a toaster or an oven or something like that, or a small grill or something. I hope Timmy's gonna have to stay on top of it. What makes this work beautiful is when you understand that the community can't be whole without the people you're serving. Because you know what? People don't want to be fixed. They want to be understood and respected. That counselor who didn't think that I was smart enough to go to college didn't know that I would get myself into college. I got hired as a peer counselor at that university that I was not admissible to. And I went back to that same high school. I felt like Harriet Tubman. Went back to that same high school to tell the students who were being told they couldn't go to the university, come on, get behind me, follow the drinking gourd. We're about to go to freedom. We're getting up out of small thinking and limiting counselors. I see your potential. And it was my job as a student to bring students out of that school. And later, the university hired me as a full-time recruiter. It was my full-time job to go into schools in Madison, and Milwaukee, and Detroit, and Chicago, and the Twin Cities, and help students who were told, you can't go to college, you're not college material, by telling my story and saying, you can do this. Once people know that they're loved and that they're understood, they move into this place of wholeness. And I understand that our society is not strong and not its strongest until people that I'm serving and caring for are really whole. If you're really just trying to address people's issues so that it makes you rest better and sleep better, it's not going to work. But when you understand the very children, the very adults, the very families that you're serving, make your community and services, that makes your community stronger, you go to work each day differently. Because when I see the folks who are coming out of prison, when I see the young children in our programs, when I see the moms that we're working with, these are not people I'm trying to fix. These are people who when are in place, make the community stronger. If a social worker or counselor had treated my mom like a single mother, a divorcee, a battered woman, a raped woman, then my life and plight would be different. I would not be here today. I would not be Dr. Alex G. I would not have traveled around the world talking about leadership principles because someone would have made a decision about what they thought she was. I'd like to think that I've made the community stronger where I live because someone along the line realized we need this woman and what she brings to this community, so we're going to invest in her like the overall good rests upon it. Can you be willing to see those who you serve and those who you will serve as someone who could be a part of the solution? In my mother's work as a social worker and as a woman who helped me start my nonprofit, she mentored women coming out of prison, women who were victims of sexual abuse and assault and rape, women going through divorce, and women who moved from other cities around the country to Madison for what they thought would be a better life. And she mentored those sisters. She had them in her home. They went out for dinner. They shopped together. My mom's a shopaholic. She thinks that shopping is therapy. It is. Okay, all right, sorry. Okay, Mama was right. She would take them around. She mentored those young folks. She mentored those young women. She helped those young moms. Right now, this morning, my mother's not at her nursing facility where they're focusing on memory care. She's downtown with the city's poet laureate because my mom is a prolific poet. She has written a book of poetry, but the poet laureate arranged for mom to be transported down to an event downtown Madison where she's reading her poetry because this poet laureate wrote the foreword in my mother's book. Some of the people who are single moms with ankle bracelets on who gave birth to children in prison are the people who go and visit my mother when I can't get there. People who my mother cared for care for my mother when I'm out of town and out of the country for work. Why? Because they were never her clients. She never fixed them. And because someone looked at her based upon her potential, she looked at each of them based upon their potential. One of those sisters who my mom mentored got her children out of foster care, got her son who was born in prison. He's working on an MBA. He just took a break from his MBA program to play pro ball in Albania. Her children are entrepreneurs. None of her children are working for anybody else. They caught her entrepreneurial gene. They're just doing it legally. But they caught her entrepreneurial gene. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Listen, you don't leave everything out in the community. You just clean it up and you just use it for good. These are sharp folks and business-minded folks. But they're helping to care for my mom because when they were in need of care, she cared for them. One day I took my mom to a dental appointment. I have power of attorney. I'm a 55-year-old mama's boy. She trained a good husband for my wife and a good dad for my daughter. And since my mom's developed dementia, her wall's kind of down, so she cusses a lot now. And she's got this thing where she talks to strangers. And because my mom studied Spanish, anyone who's not white, she thinks that they're Latino, so she just speaks Spanish to anyone. So she used to manage an apartment complex, you can be Hmong, you can be Cambodian, she'll start speaking Spanish. That gift is, I'll go to the center and they'll say, your mom spoke fluent Spanish for 30 minutes with a resident. Where did she learn this? I said, in college. They said, your mom went to college? I'm like, oh my gosh. Yeah, yes she did. Yes, she did. In fact, UW is making a movie about her that's just about to come out. On her life, about a story about being this single mom. And so she's giving back to these folks. And folks are strengthening her. She's getting to watch these folks who she's invested in really encourage her and really build her up and help her to really become who she truly, truly is. But what's happened is she realized that the community was not as good as it could be without her. And the people are realizing that the community is not as good as it can be without her. She brought others along. They're bringing her along so that we make the community better and stronger. I want you to serve people with a level of commitment. I want you to serve people with a level of dignity so that their children and their children's children will tell the story that there was an AmeriCorps member who treated my mom this way, who treated people this way, and as a result, I am who I am. You have the power to impact generations positively or negatively based upon how you see them, how you care for them, how you love them, and how you understand them. You can't teach children you don't love, and you can't love children you don't understand. You can't empower people you don't love, and you can't love people that you don't understand. And so our work is helping people, but also by loving them and understanding them. What a great opportunity you have as young, professional, gifted, and brilliant people, as a beautifully diverse group of folks who are focused on the same mission and the same goals. For you to have this opportunity to be a part of something that's great and not just seek your own good is not only admirable, it is necessary. And even though we are facing trying times, I'm giving hope that people like you are giving your lives to people who are like me 50 years ago in order to become who I am 50 years later. And so I want to thank you in advance for the children and the children's children of the people you will be lucky and fortunate enough to serve. I want to tell you thank you in advance. And I want to model to you what your work will yield. If you just keep this toast story in your mind, if you don't forget the process, if you love people and understand people, they will transform the community and it will create a place that will help and serve you. The opportunity we have is to not only build a better society, but to be the beneficiaries of that better society. Have a great day today. Have a great year. I appreciate you all so much, and thank you for giving me this time to address you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. G. Both Dr. G and his staff have been amazing with this, not just the presentation today, but also with this podcast series that we have coming up. But before we get focused on that, he has agreed to do some Q&A. So are there any questions? I see some head nods. Anyone want to willingly go first?
Can I say something while they're thinking? Hold on. One piece of my story I forgot, and I still want the question. One day I took my mom to a doctor's appointment. I digress. I found my note. And she went behind the counter and hugged the receptionist. I'm like, oh my gosh, my mom was hugging people. You can walk behind the counter hugging people. They got financial records back there. My mother went to the bathroom and I said, ma'am, I'm so sorry. My mom's like this hugging bandit. She's got dementia, blah, 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 blah. She said, your mom gave me an apartment when I was 8 months pregnant with twins. And I knew mom looked like she knew her. That's why she hugged her, but she couldn't articulate it. So this woman started telling me what my mom did for her. And this is a clinic that treats my mom with such respect. But that's so healing for me to hear my mom's story, because I just thought she was hugging a stranger, but this was a stranger who had been touched by her, by her work. That just continues to touch me. At least one question. Yes, don't ask me nothing hard. No, I'm messing with you.
So, my name is Chris Grayson. I'm serving with Public Allies Milwaukee.
Woo! So the question, I'm sorry, what's your first name? Prince, all right. Ooh, that's a strong name. So the question Prince had is how do we love children? What I realize is that when I'm going through something very tough, I don't need people to get everything I say, but to at least listen and give me space to vent. Because it's almost like if any of you are parents, you know that sometimes your children are crying because they're having a temper tantrum. But sometimes they're crying because something's really, really wrong. And you know the difference in that cry. If you don't have that experience, you don't really know. So sometimes folks are just really out the box. They really are. And we'll talk after when I'm not on the mic, because we got mandated reporters. I'm kidding. But the more you create space for folks to at least begin to talk about what's going on with them, they will own that space, and the people who disrupt that space, they'll tell them, shut up, I'm trying to say something, don't interrupt me. So what you want to do is you want to find the person who gets it, because they will bring people in. What happens is once the person breaks the ice, others will be able to say, well, you know what happened to me? So what you want to do is not let that person derail what you're doing or your program by listening, and also having some boundaries. And if you're going to disrupt my group, you can't keep coming here. You're not going to come here and disrupt what I'm doing. We're trying to serve and be a community. But I think what you really do is just create space, because what happens is people will begin to do something. I have a relative who works with children who have developmental needs, and he's often written off. And one day through acting, he told my niece that his mother was being beaten at home in front of him. In their eyes, he was just a badass black boy. He and his mother were traumatized every day And they were trying to figure out why he wouldn't pay attention in math class. And he was living in a war zone. She listened. She listened. She didn't look to listen to it at his grade point. She didn't look at his work. Through sign language. He told her. He went through stuff and he went like this. They checked into it. It was true. And so I think what we have to do is realize that the people who are the most disruptive often have the most to say. And they have the fewest listeners. So I would say the people who are the baddest, are the noisiest, lean in the furthest. And even if they don't say what's going on, they will know that they were given the opportunity to say it. And they may not say it to you, but they may at some point say it to someone else. I'm sure that baby tried to tell somebody else, but they weren't trying to listen. And my niece caught it. And so that's what we got to do. And that's hard work, and we don't pay you enough to do it. We don't honor you enough to do it, and society doesn't recognize it enough. But I want to tell you that young boy and his mother is glad somebody listened. I'm glad somebody listened, and it's hard work. But I have to trust, Prince, that you and the hundreds of others who are sitting here will be the people who at least one person, through signing, through writing, through poems, through music, will say what's really going on. Because our kids are traumatized. Our families are hurting. And we're handing out labels and not solutions. And I'm hoping that you all can be people who hand out solutions by listening to people.
Thank you.
Yeah. Prince messed me up. Any other questions? I told you don't ask me nothing hard. We're going to fight in the parking lot after this. Yes.
So you talked about your mom and the outreach that you do.
Yes.
Can you talk about what encouraged you to become a preacher?
I was fortunate to see ministry outside of the walls of our church and to see how we really care about the community. So because I cared about housing, education, voting rights, how disenfranchised people develop their voice and have room to do it, I wanted to find a way to motivate people, to encourage people, and to really empower people. And so for me, it didn't feel like something I really chose. By training, my background's in economics and African American history. But my desire to really motivate and inspire people felt like a sense of calling. But I'm really am inspired by many of our African American leaders who are also clergy leaders. Martin Luther King Jr., Andrew Young, so many, Ralph Abernathy, so many folks who are on the forefront who are named. As we get further away from the civil rights movement, we forget that they got their leadership training, their speech training, their standing up in front of a crowd. A lot of that happened in what we call Black church. That was the only platform we had for development. That's the only place we could go. Many of our artists, whether you're talking about Aretha, or you're talking about Gladys Knight, you're talking about Diana, these folks all grew up singing in choir and stuff because the church was the only place where many of us in the 40s, 50s, and 60s had free reign to exhibit our leadership skills. So for me, it just felt like something I was called and commissioned to do. And I appreciate the fact that even against the advice of some of my leaders, that it gets outside the four walls, and how do I care for the community? And so for me, I feel that it's a motivating factor to see people, to love people, to respect all people, to want to be a part of a stronger and greater society. And it gives me a personal way of living out faith, but I want to really help people grow stronger and to be stronger. And for personally, just knowing that there's something bigger than me makes me not crap on other people. Knowing that I don't get to call the rules means that I treat people with love and respect.
That wasn't too hard, was it?
No, it wasn't. Thank you. Yes. I'm sorry, what's your first name? Afro? Okay, nice to meet you. Hey now. Sure. So the question was, do people struggle in understanding their purpose? And are they fearful of that? Are they fearful of their own greatness? Was that the question? I was fearful. I was a kid who started dumbing down. My mother remarried, and my stepfather was worse than my father, but that's a whole nother speech. But he was functionally illiterate. And I remember telling myself as a 6-year-old, I will never allow myself to be smarter than my stepfather because he will withdraw his love and respect from me. It was not my peers in 7th and 8th grade. It was in my home that I made the choice. Listen, your kids are making big decisions at 6-year-old that you don't even know. He gave me a baseball glove. He wrote my name Alex, A-L-X. As a kid, it broke my heart. And I said, my father can't read. I will never be smarter than him, because if I'm smarter than him, he'll be threatened by me and he'll never be my father and he'll withdraw. I went through that as a 6-year-old. And so when I looked around, I knew the answers, but I didn't raise my hand. I knew the answers in Spanish. I could roll my R's. I understand how to conjugate, but I didn't raise my hand. I had insights about history, but I did not raise my hand because I associated being smart with being alienated. And if I really were to shine. And so I've had people that have helped to pull that. I still have to do work on that. I have to still do work to recognize stuff. I was talking to my daughter and my wife. We were having a conference call as I was driving in. I said, okay, I got to go. They're about to set up. I'm nervous. I'm sweating. And my daughter said, hey, wait a minute, stop. You are Alex G. I'm like, okay, my baby's listening to me. Don't let people put you in a box. You need to go in and do what you came there to do. I have to constantly go through that because of that wasn't trauma through physical or sexual abuse. That was just trauma through reading the situation. A lot of kids are sensitive. When you don't think they know what's going on, I read the room. And I knew who to dumb down for. And I find myself still doing that and not really pushing to do that. Like, should I mention your books? Oh, no, you don't have to. Should we call you doctor? No, you don't have to. Should we talk about you? No, should I talk about you teaching at the White House? No. Keep downplaying and belittling stuff. So yes, people you're serving need people in their cheering corners. That's why I love Mr. Lilliquist in 3rd grade. He gave me room to not dumb down. Being smart was rewarded. And he didn't withdraw because I was smart. He gave extra work. He came to my birthday party. It was a great lesson that being smart and being sharp helped you. I did not realize until halfway through my doctoral program that I was really smart. And I'm not saying that's kind of weird to say, like, oh, he's just trying to pump us up. No, I barely got out of high school. I barely got into college, but I graduated my doctoral program with honors. But it took me a while in all those years to realize I know this stuff. At one point, I was asked to lecture because I had more community organizing and church leadership experience than any of the faculty. So I gave a guest lecture in my doctoral program, and I knocked it out the park. So please, 2 things that you can do: recognize the greatness in the people you're serving. But can I be honest? Recognize the greatness in yourselves. Recognize that greatness in yourselves. Don't dumb it down. Do not dumb it down. Do not dumb it down. Do not dumb it down. You know that you're really good at something, writing, organizing. Don't play that down, because people that you, and I'm giving a lesson on this later. I can't share too much about that. I think Alexa's going to talk to you about that in just a moment. But you'll be hearing more from me when I talk about the importance of how you motivate people by what you model. This is how you know your work is successful. Not only that you, not just because the community is stronger and the people you serve are stronger, but you become stronger. But you all have a tremendous amount of talent. And can I be honest? Most of you have not even put your best foot forward yet. Most of you have not put your best foot forward yet. You've done just enough to get by because you got those old tapes in your head. You'll never be, you'll never can. No one ever think this, you're just that. Screw that. Step up to the plate. Be your best for the families that you're serving. Because if you're half-stepping, how can you tell people to whole step? Thank you all.